What an opening move by Magnaroni Cannellini.
I mean, d4 move, it just wouldn't even cross my mind.
He's the world's #1 grandmother, and his opponent, no slouch, Hikaru Nakamura, responds with the solid d5. It's the final we wanted. Chessable Masters. This is exciting, and a whole can of whoop derriere just gets opened in this game. Plus, then I've got another classic battle between them to come and match result. Let's dive in here. We see Magnus go knight to c3 PO. What a move, because after this we get bishop f4, an opening named after the baddest chess player in history, the Jabava London. We now see a6, keeping an eye on the pony jump, e3, h6, and how about this? h4 from Magnus Carlsen. He makes a kind of cannonball blasting off noise as this cannon fires it down the board. Presumably he's keeping an eye on g5, I don't know. And now apparently here best is the immediate c5 or bishop f5. But Hikaru plays e6. This one's now crying a little bit. You could go queen f3 here or g4, very aggressive, but Magnus just develops. c5 is again best, but Hikaru playing some weird stuff here. He goes b6. Now Magnus moves with knight e5. Normally you don't move twice the same piece in the opening, but fine, he does here. I just sounded like Yoda. Try at chess, we must. Now we see knight fd7. Hikaru's completely forgotten which way he's supposed to move his pieces. And look at these guys, stuck on the Etienne back row. You know, you gotta get your bits out at the chessboard. Queen f3 from Magnus. We see takes. This bishop captures. Don't forget, that's moved 3 times now. And now knight d7. The bishop backs up. Finally we get c5, but look at this. Queen g3, how annoying is that move? You not only threaten bishop c7 in some lines, but you look at the pawn, of course, which hampers the natural development. So bishop b7 was played. Magnus castles queenside. Of course Andrea starts spinning the beast. Do I even need to say it at this point? It's a given. And now these are some of the top moves, right? Queen e7. That's when you know your position is really smelly, if you have to start doing stuff like that. What does Hikaru do though? Rook c8, very natural. But now Magnus plays the classic break, e4, and it's one of those moves you barely even need to calculate. It must be laundry day, right? Because Hikaru's just hanging his king out to dry in the center, and after takes here, does Magnus even move the knight? Watch this. He leaves it on the square and captures on d5. I mean, this is some epic
mushrooms.
Because if you capture this one, then you take here. Sure, you can check, but king b1, always play it, and you're in a world of pain. You know, you're threatening to take here, or let's say with the pawn even, to then win a rook or something. You can't move the knight, you lose the queen. You know, what are you actually doing here? It's absolutely horrendous. What are the sample lines I was looking at? Oh yeah, rook c7 to try and cover. Whoops, you just drop an entire rook. What else was I looking at? Say you take. This is a nice one. Queen takes check, or queen checks rather. King here only move. This shuts a checkmating trap. I mean, just horrible. What an opening disaster. So knight f6 was tried. Takes here, given a brilliancy because you hang the knight once more, but let's be real, then you hang the queen. So this is a stupid double exclam. Chesscom need to be hanging their head in shame. Now we see knight h5. The queen moves. This one drops. Magnus flicks in the check. King captures, takes with check. Queen blocks the way, but look at this. Second pawn won. Queens leave the board. Gary the Goat's absolutely loving it. Magnus the king of the Endgame. And let's be honest here, he's 2 pawns to the good. And they're not just any 2 pawns, you know, really well connected, great structure. He just trades a bishop, centralizes a knight, protects, blah blah blah. Look at this stuff, natural chess. This knight holds together f2, and Hikaru starts pushing p, but it doesn't even matter. Not only are you 2 down, he now goes 3 down. I mean, bloomin' heck, this is where you just gotta throw in the towel. We see an exchange here. The rook lifts into the game, but Hikaru is just thrashing like a goldfish caught in the jaws of a shark. We see this rook enter the game. Magnus brings the king around after this pin, and here after knight knight c5, we see resignation. I mean, not prematurely at all. Even another pawn is going to drop now. What an absolute spanking. Poor Hikaru. We've not seen him play that badly in a long time. Now let's switch here to this next game. So that was game number 1. They drew game number 2. Hikaru had white. Now we're back with Magnus with white. He opens with e4, e5 from Hikaru. We get this little dance, bishop b5, the Roy Lopez, named after J-Lo's uncle, by the way. Very few people know that. In case you don't, you'll learn that on this channel. Do consider subscribing. Also really helps my self-esteem. Thank you. And after this move, we see knight g to e7. This is Hikaru's little pet system, right? Known as the Kotsio or Kotsio defense. Very cozy, as we can see, but there's a problem. Knight c3, knight g6, d4. The players have seen it all before now. Hikaru played it at the candidates and many other times in between. And as we know, right, he can't be bothered to look at openings, nor can Magnus. So Magnus is prepared for it. He just drops the queen back. Unusual for him. We know he loves to grind like a grandma in an endgame, but here he keeps them on the board. He's got the advantage in the center with this pawn. He tries to gain more space. Hikaru shuts it down. Both players castle. Quick king safety fist bump. Exploded out, of course, online into the webcam. And now we see bishop e3, bishop c5. These ones traded off the board. And after rook a d1, Magnus blasting through the center, knight f4 is best. You do win the bishop here, but game goes on. White with a slight advantage due to this central space and lead in development. But Hikaru, he goes knight e5, and it's given the question mark, as you can see, because if you Botez gambit here, you're doing well. But if you spot it, which Magnus does, and you save the lady, well then, after takes, you're basically forced, or this one sits there as a monster. Rook takes, just look at the development problems here, and f4's on the way. Then where are you headed? Well, f6 is played. Lord Hans Feingold not impressed, but f4, knight f7, you created a square, plus you kicked the rook. No, you don't. Magnus doesn't even move it. I can't even remember my lines. Definitely going senile. And this is the problem. Because that sat there, the bishop is woefully dead. And so the rook is dead. So what do we see, of course? King h8, breaking the pin. The rook is now going to die. So rook d4. b6, I mean, that is an ugly pawn structure, right? You won't see many more smelly today. We now see e5, and don't dare capture that pawn. Look at the lines you open here. About to drop a piece, can't move it or the rook drops. Say you try this, well, you're back in the pin, and you're in the double pin. You're dropping a piece off the board. So, of course, not captured. This one was played instead, usually a boo-boo to put it on the edge of the board, but look where it's headed. This her pony jumps in to go there, but knight f5 blocks, hits the rook as well. Now it slides back here, and this is a real sign of the desperation of Hikaru's position. He plays pawn d5. Now you're about to win a piece, unless Magnus plays the overpowered en croissant. And of course he does it. Bellows it in his best French accent. He's an absolute pro. He's got the pronunciation down to a T these days, and you can't, of course, recapture the pawn. You know, you attack it once, defended twice. This is horrendous. So Hikaru develops with bishop d7. He does also connect his rooks here, as we can see. Now Magnus goes rook e1. This one finally enters the game. Hurrah for that. And now king f2 covers this one, which was pinned. And after g5, Magnus has a great move here. But amazingly, he misses the best continuation by miles. He plays rook b3, goes for a little slider against this pawn. But if you'd gone g4, knight h6, h3, you just shut this knight out of the game, long-term lockout, and even when black takes here, it's not a big deal. The king steps in, you'll recoup the pawn, the structure's a mess, the knight's horrendous. You know, amazing position for Magnus. He normally sees that in a heartbeat, but he's been struggling this tournament, I'd say, based on his play. We see captures here. Now this pawn does drop, but knight e3, and things are getting a bit weird. You know, the bishop's now attacked, plus you intercepted the defense here. So bishop d3 covers all bases. You can now go bishop f5 and look at Ival Barovic. Things are roughly level. It's anyone's game now. We see knight g4 check though from Hikaru, and he's setting a tricky idea, because after king f3, his idea isn't actually taking here. Takes here, the knight's a bit offside, has to spend time coming back in, blah blah blah. Rook can come to the open h file. No, his idea is this one, f5, and you attack the knight, which now has to move, and when it moves, the rook drops. It's undefended. Magnus in a spot of bother. So what does he do? He spawns a seahorse, given the brilliancy, because he's shedding an entire rook, but in exchange, he picks up the bishop, and he's on that rook. Now it naturally slides to the d file, hits the knight and the pawn, but Magnus remains ahead here because he's got quite a few pawns right. These are a mess, and of course his pieces are very active. Now rook b7 technically preferred by Stock Squid, but this one was played. Now this one drops back to support the other. We see takes, rook recaptures, Magnus picks up the pawn, defends the knight, attacks this one, and we don't see takes here with check. The problem, again, is that after takes, your knight's very offside, and look at the rapid march of the white king. It reaches e7, that pawn is promoting. What do you do? So instead, coming back to the game, we see this one sidelining itself, hitting the bishop, but a really nice move by Magnus. How many of us are playing bishop h3 or bishop e6 to stay with the knight? But no, we see king takes on f4. Great calculation. If captures, king takes, and king e6. And you're just scurrying about. You can't stop the pawn running through. It's in the delivery suite. You have to give up the rook. And that's, of course, a lost endgame. Magnus has got way too many pawns and the active king. So we come back here. This one did not get captured. Instead, knight f7 goes for the pawn, stops the king marching in. Great move. Now we see knight e5, an exchange of prisoners here. Rook under fire. You can't go to c8 due to this bishop, so f8 is selected, but now this one's about to drop off the board unless you go g4 or knight d4 selected by Magnus. King g8 played. Now b3 cements the pawn structure. This one marches in, but it's given the question mark. Big rise in the bar. You could have exchanged there and remained slightly worse, but this gives a pawn. Hikaru now shows his point with rook h8. He wants to get that one to move, then pick up on h2, but there's a problem. Again, great calculation by Magnus. He plays king to e5 here. You take me, I take you. Yes, you mop up the king side, but I mop up your queen side, and now what are you doing, right? You can't go there, sorry, or there's a big fork, but say you go, what was I looking at here or something, well, then you take here. I mean, look at this, right? You're just lost. There's nothing to be done. The pawns will march through. So we come back. We didn't see this variation gone for. Instead, we see the knight move out the way, but now you're in a new world of pain because bishop e4, you hit the knight, so there's no time to take the pawn on h2. Hikaru's in disarray. He checks. The king drops back. Now this knight re-enters the game. Bishop about to drop, so saves itself. Now this rook hits the knight. Defended, we see this bit of tickle. The king's rotated round, an x-ray is set up, but this knight intercepts. The king's marching in. I mean, this is terminal. Hikaru's moribund, but he goes for one last trick here, and Magnus could simply go king b6, kick the knight, then win the pawn, but he takes, allowing this check here, and he drops a piece. I mean, this is almost as shocking as the fact that his jeans are currently on eBay for about $7,600. Yes, the ones he wore to the Blitz Championship just played in 2024, the World Championship. They're being auctioned for a charity. Get your bids in, closes at the end of the month there. Wow, now no one saw that one coming. I need to think of a pun there, but I can't do so right now. Anyway, we're going to carry on with the game here. What was played? Well, Magnus just pushes pawns because the knight is actually in jail. He goes g4, and this is his point. This one pushes, and how are you getting out, right? We see this, and this, and this, and this, and now with bishop b5 on the way, say you keep waiting, the knight's going to drop. it has to go somewhere, but it has nowhere to go. It's just dead lost, right? So Hikaru kamikazes that horsey, takes back his played, rook e4 goes to the pawn, but actually Hikaru just gives up and resigns. It's hopeless. You know, you could play check, king g7, don't go to the light square, by the way, and now yes, you could win a pawn, but look at the a pawn running, right? What to say, what to be done? It's going through. Of course, you just do something sensible, like make yourself a queen, or even a knight if you want to be super fancy. All roads lead to Rome. Magnus takes it home, and this was the final result of the match. He now reaches the Grand High Wizard Final, which is being played in 2 days' time. First, we've got the big fat losers. They're playing tomorrow, and I can't always hold it together, sorry. And then we get back to that grand final. Magnus there already though, so if someone else wins, there'll be a reset. Hope you enjoyed this one, and see you again on a future video. Cheers.